Hello. I got a
Good
message.
morning.
Actually, since it's you two, just briefly, does it sound significantly different this, or does it sound different this? Which one's better or worse? A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B,
The
C,
second
A,
one
B, C.
feels a little bit more like muffled to me.
Is this one better or the worse one?
I think that's better.
Because the alternative is this one here, which is,
Better from my point of view.
Okay.
oh, really? That's interesting because this is the MacBook microphone. And this is the wireless microphone.
Huh.
Former was better.
Okay, that makes life easier for me. I will go back to Mac Pro. Boom. Okay, I am wireless free. Hi Ken, we were just testing microphones, very, very important stuff. And it turns out the MacBook microphone is actually slightly better in this room. It does vary from place to place. So. Yeah, so today's going to be very, very exciting because I'm going to do a presentation and then I expect us to completely drop it. It'll be a short presentation because we'll be mostly focused on spatial thinking. I don't know what I said in the program, spatial something or other, what I say, spatial information, whatever, it's all related, right? And we have Ken here, who is a serious deep level expert. So I do expect, let's call them arguments. Hopefully there will be powerful arguments. I had Jim this morning, and I talked to my trainer, like, she's my barber, and she actually pointed out a few things. She said, well, isn't that bit personal preference? Oh, yes. So I'm sure there'll be more of that today with the perspectives. That's good, good. Hi, Ashkant. Hi, Fabian. Hey, Rob.
Hello.
Mark and Deanie are, of course, holding the fort in the Great Chicago event. So that's exciting. I was with them in one of the Zoom sessions just now, but now we're going to be just us. So before we start, let's ask the age-old question, how is everyone?
Today I'm going to be teaching my first ever Zoom class using my futuristic interactive software. This
Really?
week, happening this week. So we'll see how it goes.
That is, tell us more, please.
Well, mostly it's a 3D computer graphics class. So the major thing that I can do is I can be showing them while I'm right here in front of me, 3D models, and then the code. And then as I edit the code, the 3D animations and models change. So this will be a test to see whether if they're looking at me and I'm looking out at the class and, they can see what I'm looking at, whether that sort of helps the flow of everything.
Can others attend? Strangers?
No, NYU doesn't like that. However, I will record the Zoom session.
I would love to see it because it's something I am extremely interested in and very little knowledgeable about.
Well, we'll see. I mean, this is the first time I'm doing this with a class, so it could be a dramatic failure, and then I'll share that with you.
Even failure would be added value from my point of view.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with Fabienne. A dramatic learning experience either way. I mean, one of the things that I've really learned over the last year and a half where we properly focused on XR is how many assumptions just do not hold when the headset is on, rather technically or otherwise. And I was at a wedding this weekend. It was an extremely lavish affair. A childhood friend of my wife from way back when they were about 5. Anyway, they got married in the Four Seasons by Tower Bridge in London. So you can imagine that's not nothing. I'm not used to that kind of thing. But there's one thing really worth mentioning. The room we had the dinner is where the United Nations first met. So they call it the UN room, they have paintings and all of that. But it was a really pleasant room. It was quite large, very dark oak kind of walls and, a lighter ceiling. And it just struck me that this is one of the kinds of rooms I could imagine being in VR. Because Fabian and I experimented quite a while with, if you want a background, and you don't always, as we'll go into in a minute, the actual room will matter a lot. So I'm trying to get in touch with the right people to ask for permission to do a 360 so we can test if it really works, because maybe it doesn't. Yeah, so Ken, we look forward to seeing the video, but also if you later in the year want to present that kind of approach here, that would obviously be quite wonderful.
Okay, so maybe we could 1 week just slot that in or something. And
Yeah.
also,
Please tell me when you're going through the live student reality one, and we'll figure it out. Let me see. Yeah, okay, let's wait 1 more minute, see if anybody comes in, because then we have a 9-person layout here. So Tess, are you getting ready to move across?
I am. I'm looking at some places right now and studying up on London neighborhoods. And
How well do you know London?
I mean, I've been there on numerous occasions, but not well where if you say something like, Canary Wharf to me or Bermondsey or something like that, I know if I want to live there. So that's yeah, I'm actually using Perplexity to compare and contrast neighborhoods for me.
I can give you advice in 30 seconds, and it's based. Oh, sorry, Rob, please go ahead.
I can recommend Stoke Newington, where Edgar Allan Poe went to grammar school.
Okay, yeah. I think I read a fictional book about something about that area. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a charming little villagey feel in Hackney. My daughter
Yeah.
lived
Hackney's very popular. I have a lot of friends who've recommended Hackney to me, but it is very popular for sure. What was your 30-second introduction? I mean, sorry, recommendation?
Hi, Peter. Yeah, no, it's very simple. Two things. First of all, London is a very, very, very safe city. Very safe. There are no bad neighborhoods in London. You don't have to worry about it. Some of them are fancy, some of them are more deprived, but there's nowhere you should feel, concerned. Obviously, don't be stupid and walk with, like 1,000 pounds like this in the middle of the night. But other than that, it's fine. Crime here has decreased dramatically over the last 10 years. And yeah, like violent crime just basically doesn't happen very much. Also, because of the tube network, a little bit overground, but it doesn't really matter where you live. Almost everywhere is an hour away.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot of the stuff has been close to the tube, but then sometimes some of it's overground too, and I'm not sure what that, it's just learning, is that as reliable as the underground?
It is.
Kind
It is now.
Yeah.
It truly is. Every morning we take the train in. Of course, sometimes there are disruptions, but it's very rare. So yeah, everybody take Tessa's motivation and move to London. It's a great place. Then we can have less.
I'm extremely excited overall. I have an elderly cat who has to stay here, and that's the worst part about it. But other than that, I'm extremely excited.
How are you qualifying to live there?
I got a global talent visa.
Okay.
Yeah, for my writing. I had worked on a show that had an Emmy nomination, and so that qualified me. I got a couple of letters of recommendation, and I was fortunate. I got approved. So, yeah, I was very lucky about that. So I've been working on this since about February. I think I got approved in June, and yeah, this is what I'm doing.
So by this time next year, you'll be writing Midsummer Murders, right?
I know, I'll be working on the 27th season or something.
That is not all Britain is about, for the record.
Yes, I know. There's Downton Abbey too.
On that note,
It's incredible the murder rate in small towns in England.
Oh yeah, it's really, don't live there.
Well, I want to meet a lady so we can solve crime together, because I understand all the ladies like to solve crimes. They're all the Lady Emily's, Lady Anne's. There's books about all of them solving crimes.
so
Well,
maybe London is very safe because all the murderers go to the small towns.
That's right.
I wasn't going to give the game away, but there is something to that. And the ladies here are sleuths. I mean, my wife finds things I could never find, even in the fridge. Like, where is it?
Like
Right.
murder weapons.
On that note, I'm going to start a 10-minute presentation.
Don't touch that tomato.
Yeah, that's the thing. Okay. Feel free to interrupt as usual. If something is going to be explained, then I will, say so. Right. So the future of text is what we call this in general, but of course it really is the future of texts because there are different kinds of text for different kinds of reasons and different kinds of scenarios, right? And there are also different kinds of, oh, hang on, you guys are so big. Sorry about that. Okay. Similarly, there are different kinds of thoughts and different kinds of thinking, different modes of thinking, right? This is very obvious, but it's also very important when we look at what to do here. So some require scaffolding, others do not. Some thought is passive, like computer games, not all the time, but generally. And some thought is active, such as inventing things and trying to make something new, right? All are about relationships to some extent. So if we use text to represent thoughts as the objects of knowledge, then we'll need the means to get to grips with them. That sentence is not perfect, but please forgive me. So in our community, as I think you all know, we talk about knowledge objects in volumes. Of course, these things can be recursive, but volumes is basically something that can be broken down into subunits. Knowledge units, knowledge objects are kind of useful in themselves. This is a very fluid definition. And it's important to look at because volumes will be important for what we have. For instance, a volume, as I'm sure you would agree, Rob, is a book, journals, proceedings, collections, libraries, the web, and so on. It is what we have. Something is known about these things. Something has either been published or put into a collection by us. Knowledge objects are also important and crucial for that, but they're more important in a way for what is new. When we're generating something new, we don't necessarily know in what kind of a volume or configuration we want it to be. The reason I'm making this distinction, and I'll go back for a second, is that the way that we interact with a journal, such as we want to build an XR experience for our own books, is different for how we build the tools, infrastructure, environment for inventing or writing something new, right? So today, I'm trying to take Mark Anderson's advice and go back to the most basic we can, because even that has lots of issues. So today is only about knowledge objects, how to manage knowledge objects in space. That's hopefully what we'll have lots of fun discussing. We'll have to go through these things. We'll go into detail, but just to already highlight the fact that there's so many issues. So all of you, I think, have seen the map in Author. And the reason I'm showing you today is at the bottom, we have these interface elements. So for instance, once I select something, I can click on Layout and then choose a layout. We don't have anything like that in XR. We don't have a toolbar. We don't have keyboard shortcuts. We have none of that. So we need to do a lot more inventing. So once things are in space with none of these conventions that we're used to, we have at least our hands, and then we have the needs for things to do with them. I will go through this list. I'll bring it up again later if you want, but this is basically the whole presentation now. We need to be able to select single knowledge objects. Today, in Fabien's environment, we pinch. Last year we had a laser. I'm not a fan of lasers, but these are still things to be considered. Even selecting something has to be built. Then we have a secondary problem, selecting a group of knowledge objects. And then the question of, should it move freely or should they be billboarded? And if so, what kind of billboarding? And as in Ken's environment, I believe, it should sometimes be billboarded for more than one user. All of these things are up for grabs. How do we scale things? How do you scale the volume in relation to the objects inside it? How do you view aspects of something, like show me only certain aspects of this? These are important issues. We also need to be able to specify the appearance of objects, volumes, and environment, and change those. So what came up in my gym session was the whole thing of, I was talking about some people like a gray background. Some people want a room in the background. And of course, the point is, this changes between different people, and of course, even for yourself, depending on what you're doing. For me, it might be a bit too intimidating to have all kinds of things floating. I want them to have something to go on, but then I may want to get rid of that. So then we have another issue of how to deal with groups or volumes to arrange them, like you saw, have everything left aligned, could be that simple, or everything organized by author. How do we nest them and hide and reveal? This is really, really important because a visual space, even though it's 360, 3D, can easily get very, very cluttered. Text takes space if it's going to be legible. Even if it's a dot, it takes space, so we need to manage that. And the environment, let's do that first. We can choose to have a neutral or a real room background or augmented reality, depending on the system. And we should be able to toggle them. How do we want to do that? We've talked about a cube often, on and off. I keep coming back to it because we don't necessarily need all the sides visible or active. I could imagine entering a room and having a 2D knowledge map in front of me, arranging it until it gets 3D. When it came in, it only had a floor. I may want to add something later, but it allows me to have a thing to grasp. Then we also need to look at, should this virtual room be designed with the idea of the user having their physical table? Because then they can rest their arms and do things on the table or do things close up, or they can bang their arms. These are really important issues to decide on because we don't necessarily know where the user should be. And then finally, the interactions we have, and I'm sure you've thought of more. We have one-handed gestures. We also have the second hand that can come into this. We have the mana menu, which means a lot of different things to different people. Should the commands be floating out? Should they be in the finger? Should they appear this, that, or the other? There's also controls that can be in the objects. You pinch something and suddenly controls come out. This can include the ring menu. We have mini views of a room and so on. So in closing of the presentation, to help us with getting to discuss, what does it mean to move text in space? And also, why would we want to do it and how would we want to do it? And that was that. Thank you for your patience. And let's just invent stuff.
I had a quick thought.
Yes, quick thought, please.
I've become a fanatic of the New York Times B, which is making words out of 7 letters with one in the middle that all words have to have. And the other letters, the other 6 letters are in a circle around the permanent letter. And you can rearrange the circle at random. And I find that very useful when you're trying to puzzle things together. And I'm thinking that when I'm doing fiction, I want to sometimes get jarred into new configurations. So throwing text at random, I know it's weird, but if you do that with ideas, sometimes you get 2 of them next to each other that chime.
That's not weird at all. That is really, really cool. And it goes with something that I think Fabian has actually implemented. If you throw text to the floor, it means you want to delete it. Right. So having that kind of spatial thing and absolutely to have different means to spark your imagination is really important, especially spatially. Thank you, Rob. Peter.
Yeah, I really want to have reified view specs so that I can have my configuration and preferences for the environment represent as an object in the environment.
Can you explain further, please, Peter? I saw this picture of Tom while you were talking, which kind of took my attention.
All right. Let's say I decide that I want to go with depth representing one particular attribute of my objects, left, right representing another attribute. So basically, I mapped my 3 spatial dimensions to 3 arbitrary attributes in the object, and I want to be able to represent that mapping as an entity within the environment so that I can go back and select that to just reconfigure the whole space instantaneously. So I'd be able to have several little, maybe little glowing green balls could represent view specs. And I'd be able to select one of those glowing green balls, then maybe have a head-up display interface appear, allowing me to do that mapping in a conventional 2D structure to select, okay, this axis is going to represent this attribute. So I'm basically going for a cyberspace first steps, Benedictine cyberspace kind of an approach. And then again, by reifying the view spec itself into an element within the environment, then I have the potential of being able to select two view specs, maybe do higher order operations that could relate to two view specs together to create some sort of a composite. I want to be able to have an unfolding of the spaces so that I can start with 3 dimensions and then open a point within that 3-dimensional space to represent all of the objects that would fall at that same location displayed based upon 3 other dimensions, and do that through several layers and steps. But I think having the abstraction of the view spec made as a concrete element within the environment would be really critical to opening up an affordance to be able to do that with.
So you mentioned 2 interesting things there. One of them is these little green balls, for the sake of argument, as you said. That's very similar, I think, to what Fabienne has as code snippets.
Yep.
So that makes eminent sense. One of the things is these little bits of text or icons floating in space. From my world, if I do something in author, I should be able to put code in there. I should be able to put a whole different thing in the definition, so that should be available or not. It's important that it doesn't have to be. As Mark has pointed out, spatial hypertext doesn't show connections. But that spatial hypertext is only a part of our world. If we want connections or we want code, if we wanted to open up something. But Peter, more specifically, when you talk about going deeper and all of that stuff, how do you imagine that actually happening in, let's call it implemented reality? Like, for fun, what would the gesture be, and what would happen to the world that already is there? Would it go
Okay.
or would it? Yeah.
All right. I think I want to abstract out what I'm looking at a little bit. Let's say I'm outside of the cube that contains all of my data objects in it. I'd like to have a probe, which was another idea that we had in Cyberspace First Steps book, and that could be maybe a blue dot. Now, I'd want the blue dot to be manipulated by my hand, but outside of arm's length. So now imagine that my hand is inside of a couple nested volumes. Okay, nested sphere centered at the exact center of mass of my hand. Moving my hand from that center point would control the vector of motion of the probe. So if I push my hand forward a little bit, the probe would start moving forward into the data space. And of course, there'd be scaling as it went in deeper. The little probe would appear to be getting smaller as it moved in, selecting a particular point within that volume. If I move my hand up a lot, the probe would start shooting up at a high rate of speed. If I pull my hand back down to the center of where I originally went, it would slow, and there could be some natural dampers built in too, so that if I wasn't exactly where I originally started, it would just sort of be nudged back into a neutral position, even though I didn't have the fine enough muscular control to be able to do it otherwise. So we have to have a process that's watching my hands offset from the original midpoint and sort of adjusting that on the fly. And that would be controlling the vector of the probe within the data space. Then once I get to my point of interest, I could either use my other hand or a pinch or some other gesture to say, okay, now I'm interested in that particular point within the first 3 dimensions, and that would trigger the unfolding. And this would open another cube in the data space off to the side somewhere so that it's not overlapping the elements in the first cube. I might rotate myself around in the room a little bit, maybe turn 30 degrees to my right, and the new cube would open at that location. Now, that cube would allow me to explore 3 other dimensions of all of the data elements that would have been mapped to the single point in the original 3 spaces. So this way, we're able to explore higher dimensional data sets in a successive fashion.
That's very interesting, and we've got a lot of hands up. But if you could do some sketching of that, I think that could be very valuable. Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
And Tom.
I think I've said this before, but one of the things is when we create an artificial environment, we have a lot of freedom in terms of what that environment looks like. But freedom isn't always a good thing, especially to people who weren't the creators. And I mean, I think when we deal with a real physical environment in the physical world, there's a lot of assumptions we make about that space, that this couch actually is there, and if I sit on it, I'm not going to fall on the floor and things like that, and that gravity works and things like that. And we've trained ourselves to do that. When we go into a spatial environment that is created by us, though, all those things in theory go out the window, but that doesn't mean our brains suddenly switch over and work in that way that, understands that implicitly, that environment. I mean, one of the reasons I've never liked first person shooter type of games, because if I'm doing this for real, I'm moving my body and I don't have to think about how do I get my hand to do this or how to duck or anything like that. Whereas then I have to figure out all these key combinations to do stuff that I would implicitly do with my brain. So that's something we have to bear in mind. And related to that, and related to Peter's comment, I think that, we also have to remember that in this environment, we are not limited to three-dimensional space in a sense, because if we start doing colors and other representations of information, we're creating more than 3 dimensions. And that may be necessary to help simplify and understand what's going on. There's also the temporal dimension. Can you scroll back through the reality you've just walked through? Oh, I forgot about that document back there. Take me back to that. That's something that you could do in the library that Tess shared, but in the sense of the way that this works, it would theoretically work a little differently. Or you could bookmark things and be able to go back. We do typically frown on people spray painting library books as a way of marking them so they can find them again, but you could do that in this environment without being destructive, right? So I think it opens a lot of doors, but we have to be really mindful in how we walk through those doors and how that works, right? So
Virtual graffiti is a very important aspect, Tom, and whether we stay within the laws of physics also. So thank you very much. We should definitely have a section on virtual graffiti, aka annotation, at some point. Once we get kind of the basic how we do stuff, how do we do the stuff on top? Ken.
Okay, this seems an appropriate venue for me to share some of my little skunkworks experiments that I'm doing.
Yes,
I spent
please
a lot
do,
of
always.
time. Say it again.
Yes, please, always.
Okay, all right.
We love your demos. They're highly inspirational.
Okay, I spent a lot of time working on getting rendering on these things in WebXR to be fast. So I can basically render things which are information, which are things like line drawings and text and editable text and all that in a single mesh, it sounds very nerdy, but it means that I can get lots of that stuff in real time, even though this is just a stupid little Android device. And the reason that I did that is ever since I was a kid, I've been very inspired by these science fiction, and I include the recent Sherlock Holmes in this, science fiction representations of the memory palace. You walk into the room and, hey, there's all my information. And as I gesture and as I talk, and of course, now it's not science fiction. You can talk and your computer understands what you're saying. That's actually just reality now. And in my house, where I am now, I have a room that's about 6 meters by 6 meters square. And when we designed the house, I said, I want a room. I said to my wife, I want a room which is just my VR room that's 6 meters by 6 meters square with no furniture in it. And the reason is because I'm going to put on these things and walk around. And it's actually more accurately an XR room, because I basically what I do is I just put up text and I put up things. But here's the thing is I do not believe that I can just sit here and say, I know what that's going to be. I think what I need to do is a project, like a book project or a programming project or something, and say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do a content-based thing. And then I'll realize all my mistakes. Yes, go on.
I have to say, Ashkant has asked for this source text, so to speak. Ken, you're extremely welcome to have that for all the books. I'm going through book one, which is massive. And it is all done in Author, so we'll export it as the normal stuff. If you guys, any of you, need it in a different way, all you need to do is tell me, And if the programmers can do it in the export, we will do it on the export. So if you want something to play with, Ken, we'll have something for you. Please
Well,
continue.
that's great. But thank you. Thank you. That'd be very helpful. But but I think my major message here is everything that I've said, while technically okay, isn't the answer. The answer is when I actually start to use it for something, I'm going to realize that all of my decisions about this is how you use voice, this is how you use gaze, this is how you use pointing, were all wrong. This is how things move when you walk through them, and that I'm just going to have to keep hacking based on doing an actual content-based project. So I'm just telling you, I've done a lot of work, but I know very little.
Tess, I see your hand. I just have to comment really briefly on what Ken just said there again. I don't know if I've shared this with you, but when I started my PhD, there was a presentation of knowledge, and I cannot find the source of this, so tell me if you know, but it said, when you know a certain thing, it's like a circle. And the outside circumference of the circle has a certain size, so you know what is outside. But as you learn more, this area becomes bigger. So the more you know about a field, the more you know you don't know. It's that sentence we've all heard, but to see it graphically is really, really beautiful. And that is all we're trying to do in this community, and enlarge the sphere of our ignorance. So thank you for bringing that up, Ken. It's because of your humble nature that you develop so much. Tess, thank you for your patience.
Okay, sorry about that. I love that I'm going after Ken because it really dovetails. So many things that he said really dovetail with what I was thinking, and I think to me it comes back to I kind of like purpose, who's the user, and I think the wonderful thing about this is there's like an infinite pool of users, but there's going to be different experiences. Ken, I know exactly what you meant when you're talking about the Holmesian and Memory Palace, and I think that for a lot of commercial users, this idea that you can walk into this, beautiful old English library space and maybe customize it, choose, do you want a fire on? Is there snow outside? Like, here's all your books. For a lot of people, that is going to be an incredibly appealing experience. And in a beautiful interface that's going to blow their minds. It's not going to maybe be the biggest the most appealing for maybe someone who's doing data research. I don't know, the big Peters example with the data sets and everything. I think that's a different application. So what I love about this technology is that the possibilities are tremendous, but I do think that it's who is the user, and then custom, it's whether the user can customize it themselves or whether it's different models that get put out there to the user. It's a very specific thing, because I think that it's almost too, I see it as being again, a commercial user is going to want a more inviting experience. They're going to want something personalized to them, something that feels that makes full use of the VR technology and kind of creating a world, whereas somebody else might want something that's just going to simplify getting the different data together. So anyway, that's I guess my comment.
It's a really important point. A couple of things on that. First of all, our user is an academic for the Sloan project, not for all our discussions, but for that specific thing. The wider thing, so what Fabien will be building in the last few months now, based on what he has, my feeling is, and I'm very glad I get to test this with you guys, is not necessarily the user. What I mean is, if we have a video of someone in the environment doing, Fantasia, Minority Report, all of this, and someone looks from the outside and says, holy moly, what in the world? How could you do that? As long as it's not stupid interface where you twist in unnatural ways and your hands fall off, I don't mind that there's a learning curve. Like when you get in a car, you will need to know something, but the reason you get in a car to drive is because you've seen other people have the freedom of movement. So our job is to really show the freedom of mental movement, right? So that is why it's so important that we build a self-consistent environment where you use the hand menu for this, you do this for that. So you may need a week to get used to it. But provided you've seen someone really, because in the early experiences we had, and Fabian is probably going to get pissed off at me for this, but he's built amazingly rich things. But when I put this headset on people's heads that I know, and they can move text from a map from here to there, that's mind blowing. Right? So we have to keep the from here to there, and now how do I group it? How do I fold it? All of that, right? And having the discussion, even with you guys who are so involved in this, it's really, really complex. Like many of you, this is what keeps me up at night, just trying to put it together. So Tess, sorry for this long reply to you, but all I'm saying is the real user we're not ready for yet. Now we're there for the race car driver to really show off the race car. And then hopefully in the future, we can tone it down for other users also. And I see Ken nodding his head for the record, since the AI won't get the video for the record. Anyone else nodding your head a lot? I'll just say everybody's nodding. I can do that. Does that make sense? Is that a fair thing to say, Tess?
Oh, it's not, I mean, it's just a discussion. There's no fair, I appreciate though the clarification of who we need to be thinking of for the purposes of this discussion. And I think it's going to be, everything that we don't think about anymore, how we interface with our phones, how we interface with our computers. There's a universal interaction that we don't think about, that at one point was new to everyone in all of our lifetimes, and now we don't think about it. And the learning curve's pretty steep. We learn it pretty quickly. But I do think there's also, when I was envisioning what I would want to see as a writer for my presentation last week, I did have a very much incorporating some of the language we already use in our regular computer interfaces. Okay, well, you'd be able to right click on this, even if it's just me doing it in space. I'd right click on that in order to select how I wanted to mark this note or whatever it was.
And this is how I find out you're a Windows user.
Well, I mean, I've been on Mac for, probably 15.
I'm just teasing you. I'm just saying,
yeah.
Even within the traditional GUI, there are some language differences which are important to consider going in. Sorry, yes.
Oh no, I'm not. I don't feel like I'm being called out for. Sorry, I'm like, don't call me a Windows user. It's very political. But no, I've got all Mac and have for decades. But you still have a similar. You can still right click on. That's how you think about it on the keypad or whatever.
So the way we're planning to go forward now is because we've done what we need to do. So I'm the design director. Dini is, of course, the lead PI on this, and my design direction, as I've discussed briefly with Fabian, but I didn't want to stress him while he was still working on the ACM hypertext, is we're going to do small tests. And then if at the end of the year, Fabian can put it into one experience, that's nice, but it's nothing more than nice. If we finish the year with, here are 6 different URLs, one of them is how to move stuff, the other one is how to scale stuff. As long as they relate to each other, they could be in the same, that's fine. Because even the notion of how to take thing from here to there and see more is really, really difficult. So billboarding, Tess, are you familiar with the term in VR?
No.
Okay, so it means very different things to different people, it turns out. But the basic notion, the original kind of notion is, if you have something in space, especially text, and you move, the text plane will follow you, so it's always facing you, a billboard, right? Ken has done something really quite brilliant. If there's more than one person in the room, each person will have a different billboard. So each person will read it from their perspective, right? Fabian has also done something quite brilliant, because in his environment now, with a hand, you snap something and it kind of twists a bit, so it's a bit awkward for reasons we're going to have to keep refining. But when you let go, it will billboard to your head and stay there. If you now move your head, it'll still stay at that angle. Mm-hmm. Right? So to not have, I mean, it's really, really cool graphically. If you have all kinds of lines of text going, in a jumble, super beautiful, super designy, but a mess. So this allows you to control that, but I don't think that's all there is to it, right? So the way you do that is so super important. And also then we have to figure out a way, by the way, Fabienne, do you have a way to do group select now? You do, right? Like some kind of a cube, a volume.
I mean, we do have a couple of experiments on this. Either putting things without an existing volume, visible or not, or selecting until we stop selecting. I mean, we have different ways.
Oh, Ken, I want to hear what you have to say about this, and thank you, Fabienne.
Yeah, so this is the sort of continuation of I know nothing kind of speech. In my system, I give you the option of saying, okay, this text object right now, whenever you want, is always facing me. And of course, then it's always facing you if we're in the same room. Or I can say, no, I'm going to put it at this particular orientation, and it's just fixed in that orientation in the room. And the reason that it's not a tricky technological issue, but it's a tricky design issue because you're making different statements. In the first statement, you're saying, this is my, even though it's there, it's like my personal thing. It's following me around. It knows about me. I can see it moving. And the second one, it's like, it's part of the furniture. It's part of the architecture of this room when I'm not even there. And so there's a subtle kind of psychological difference about how you're supposed to pay attention to it and what information you're supposed to get from it that I think is really more about people than about technology. And like I said, I need to get some mature use cases to be able to tease that out.
I'm so glad you said that. Where I'm sitting right now, actually, I'll show you because it's very relevant. I happen to have a window that faces the garden, like this, which is something I've wished for all my life. And it turns out the reason humans like jungly type places is our brains developed not in flat environments. I know most of you know this, but it means that having leaves or whatever, we don't count them, we don't process them as, nobody could look at a tree and then look away and then say how many branches there were, right? But that is our background. That is the background process of our brain. Like in the compression algorithm, that is actually soothing. So Ken, I think when you talk about furniture in that sense, to have an information room that becomes incredibly busy, like 1,000 leaves, doesn't necessarily have to be difficult. It can be pleasant. I have no idea how to get there.
Well, I do know that every once in a while, a student comes into my office at NYU, and my walls are just lined with books and books, which just basically means that I'm old and I've been there forever. And because, I don't like to throw out books, of course. So, but every once in a while, a student says, blah, 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 blah. And I reach up to a shelf and I grab a book, and I didn't even know that I knew it was there. But it's because there's this spatial memory of the room that I'm not even aware I have, that I think is a really important thing for us to build on in this kind of environment. We're good at that stuff, so we shouldn't throw it away.
Oh, it's so important, and that's why in my brief presentation at the beginning of this, I talked about the difference between volumes and objects, because volumes, like books, we do need to find where they are. That spatiality is important. So to go between these things is really important. I want to have Peter's virtual library that looks like a nice library, exactly what you have, Ken, but virtually. I think we should all have that if we want to. And then when you open up a book or a volume, you should be able to read it, on your laptop if you want, or stay reading. But then if there is a spatial thought thing in that, of course you should be able to let it free. And then if you want to get rid of the background, of course you should be able to. These things are very, very important. Ashkant, please.
One of the things that seem to trouble me though is a lot of these interactions we develop this muscle memory or maybe associations that we have with physical environments. As Ken just said, right? We develop over time. Is there a way in these virtual environments that we're creating now in XR to maybe somehow shorten that process, or maybe make us experts in customizing the UI, at least experts in the sense whatever configuration we have, experts in only that configuration, not necessarily generally for that software. Is there a way that we can maybe shorten that time, gain some expertise in using the UI or the software itself, so that we are more productive and more, like able to use the, sorry, am I freezing up?
You're okay. Hear you and see you.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of troubles me because like a lot of the times we explore kind of different concepts, but then some of the core ideas that we're just talking about is more gained through practice and expertise in this specific gestural system or specific way the software is set up, or the UI paradigm, interaction paradigm. So maybe are there any like good ideas for how we can make this like shorten this time maybe?
I have thoughts on this. I'm sure everyone else has too, but my thoughts are based on make the data open in summary. Not just open, but accessibly, technically open. So I'll give you my 30-second PhD. When I started my PhD, I downloaded PDFs and there was no metadata attached whatsoever. I thought that was really scary, especially for ACM hypertext, right? For ACM documents. So my PhD became add an appendix where I use the BibTeX formatting, which is just something equals something in quotes, to say the author, the title, and all of that. Really, really basic stuff. And of course, Windsurf has been hugely helping me trying to get it implemented in places. Of course, it's not going to happen. But now what we have, and this goes back to what Tess was talking about, we have a new paradigm in XR. If we as a community manage to do something or other where the data, the spatial data and the relationship data is really available and it goes between what you're building, what Fabian is building and what Ken is building and so on, it will become the standard. I really believe that. So, let's say Tess decides to invest in a more commercial, more end-user friendly environment for her books reading audience. And Ken is all about certain knowledge work. As long as we have the objects in between, I think we're fine. And one more addition to that is when I was a teacher at London College of Communication, we had the Future of Text, told the students, you don't have to be there, take the day off. But if you're there, you shut up the whole day unless you have a question. And there were so many students that have to keep getting chairs. So that was lovely. Somebody went through and talked about some nonsense. There was some nonsense question, but then the point of it was the origins of the ARPANET, which became the internet. So I started telling them how it was students doing it. They went, and then I said, oh, hang on a second, Vint, do you mind taking over? Windsurf was there. It was like a Woody Allen moment, right? So he took the mic and he explained to people how it was done. We are those people. That is not bigging us up. That is the reality of where we are in history. But, the reason Fabian has been doing so much JSON is partly because of the shareability. I really think it comes down to that simple. And I would like to add to that something Dini has really emphasized, and I'm glad she has. XR first. You should be able to export all of this stuff to some flattened format, but if you lose something, it's okay, because it should be XR first. It shouldn't be beholden to the past, right? This is one of the reasons when looking at all these objects, I like the idea of a wall, literally a map, that you can then do spatial. So when you flatten it to go back out, the Z dimension is lost from your screen. It's still encoded, but if it doesn't render right, it's okay, because that's not what it's for, right? It's like a photograph from a movie. It shouldn't have everything. Hang on, did Vint tell you? No, Tom, Vint did not tell me the interpretation was wrong, like in that Woody Allen thing. But no, I mean, it is amazing because of my relationship with Doug Engelbart. I've known so many of the pioneers, including Ken right here. And it is an intensely human story. When I was teaching, that's what I tried to tell people. It is what the humans want to do this stuff, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the most specific thing. So let's imagine we're doing a concept map and we're putting things up. Oh, Tess, you put your hand up. I can do that later. Please go ahead.
It's just a very brief thing. I just wanted to echo what you said about what the humans want, and it's one thing I find the conversation I keep having over and over again with writers and others in my, from more of a creative background is get involved, find out what these things do, and make them work for you, or find out what you can do with them. It goes back to the whole human in the loop, but we have agency, and the technology is just here to help us or to make us better, or help us do, explore new frontiers. So I just wanted to echo that.
Thank you for saying that. So, okay, so the world is a thing. There are things happening at the moment. There's intense disagreements between different perspectives in the world. And considering some things happening to me personally through close friends recently and bigger events that we all know about, we have to figure out as a species how to have better discourse. You're absolutely right, Tess. And I have to wonder personally if after Christmas I'm going to continue with text or go into dialogue. I don't know. It's just, I don't want to bring my son up in that kind of environment. We're all having issues. But I do believe, Tess, that if we do the same data and different interactions, maybe we can help each other understand stuff. I mean, great literature puts you in someone else's mind, right? And I'm not saying that somebody who is on the extreme on whatever political side is necessarily going to read a good book, but I'm saying that with XR, maybe we can help people examine their own perspectives. If I didn't believe that deeply, I wouldn't have been able to do this for 14 years. But that has to be the goal. It can't just be cooler text floating about. But what I mean further, Jess, is, you're saying that the tech is here to serve us. Not really. The tech is here to serve the people who make the tech, right? If they can sell it. So right now, Author is number 5 in productivity on the App Store. It's featured in apps for students to write, one of maybe 5, 6, 7 or so apps. I make roughly $200 a day. That's not a lot of money, right? So if you want to make money with tech, you have to have a certain perspective. We here have a different perspective. And, to build these things, we really, really have to support each other. I see Fabienne saying modifiable by all. Fabienne, you're absolutely right. And after Peter and Ken, please talk more about that, because I fully agree and support it. But Tess, in closing, the tech is here to serve us. We got to make sure that us is really, really inclusive. It can't just be us, Google, Microsoft, Apple, whatever. It has to be what we want to do. Sorry for the long speech. Peter and then Ken, please.
Okay. Building on what Frode just said, I think end user programming capabilities are absolutely critical. We used to have software in the early days that was very open-ended. You'd have a small number of affordances, you'd be able to combine them in almost an infinite number of ways, and that would let you take a program and push it in a different direction. Then we got there's an app for that mentality, where every tool became more and more narrowly constrained to the point where you need to have 36 programs to do what a single generic drawing program used to be able to do back in the 80s. And it's incredibly frustrating, and it's really disempowering of users. It makes everybody feel like they have no ability to modify their environment. They're not learning and enhancing their mind by using the tools. They're just, can I find someone who built something that does exactly what I need in this particular instance? And it's so very frustrating. We need fine-grained addressability like Engelbart built into systems. And that brings another question to mind. Should objects track an internal history of where they've been in the space? So should I be able to query something, were you ever in the lower right corner, and when? That kind of a question could prove to be valuable. I'm not sure how yet, but it's the kind of an open-ended affordance that somebody else might build on to do something I hadn't even thought of. And a beautiful stark example between the app for that mentality and broad open-ended tools, or an application like Tinderbox that Mark Anderson has contributed so much documentation to. And Mark Anderson's creation of ATBRef has allowed the entire user community of Tinderbox to take off and start leveraging the affordances that Mark Bernstein built into Tinderbox, to push that program in every imaginable direction. So it's not just an outliner or a spatial hypertext system. You can turn it into a software development environment. Attorneys have turned it into case management systems. Doctors have used it to create patient record systems. It is so open and malleable compared to other systems out there that lots of times the user community will create a solution that will eventually get folded into the core program. So at first, I'll find some crazy way to hack around it, maybe use the run command feature. The best command in Tinderbox is run command, which allows the application to shell out to the command line and run arbitrary command line applications on data for an object that you're working with. And that opens so many doors. So you can start using it as a parser generator, and you can use it to push it in every imaginable direction. And again, it's completely unbounded as to what you can do with that application. So users might come up with a subset of functions they build themselves, and then if they prove to be useful enough to the community, other people start adopting. We're starting to work in terms of how we can get reusable libraries and modules that we can start porting to share code amongst the user community. And then eventually some of that functionality gets folded in as direct commands within the system. So instead of having to run a user script, it becomes a command in the action language of the program itself for improved optimization. So it's a completely different philosophy of how you design software from what you have in the App Store world.
Yeah, Peter, that's really important and very related to what Fabienne is talking about and implementing. But we got to, after Ken has been talking, let's think about what we mean by programming, because obviously it's not just typing commands. It can be very, very extensive. So thank you very much for that, Peter. Ken?
I just wanted to push back against the more philosophical parts of what you said, in that, Oscar Wilde said it really well. We're all standing in the mud, but some of us are looking at the stars. And I do not even begin to believe that anything we do is suddenly going to cause universal enlightenment and everyone's going to stop having human nature, because human nature is kind of like tautologically human nature. People are tribal, people are jealous, people, fear death, people develop enemies in their head. I mean, none of that is going away. And it doesn't matter what I create or you create, none of that's going away. However, we're the tool builders in the universe, and we build tools because they want to exist, and we make them useful, and people use them, and people's lives become enriched if they allow their lives to become enriched. So I'm not going to wait around for, hey, the politicians are no longer idiots now. Great. I'm just going to keep making good stuff because that's what we do. And I don't think you need to have an argument that we're on some path toward universal enlightenment, because it's a false argument for us to do what we do and try to make lives better for people.
Well, this is an interesting disagreement, because obviously we don't disagree black and white at all. Okay, so if people don't mind, and without being judgmental, let's bring in a little bit of politics, because the world is politics, including climate change. And so here in the UK, we had over 100,000 people marching over the weekend with something that I don't really agree with, but I can understand that, the pendulum will swing roughly between right and left many times. And when you properly talk to any regular human being, you'll find out they're not either right or left. It's a muddle. We're all a bit of a muddle. But I do think there is a bit of a, thank you, Jim, and the rest. I do think that there is a kind of a pendulum point somewhere in the middle, where the last class that I taught as a teacher was on two things. One was on sex, and the other thing was on killing. Because I wanted to wake the students up to, these important things to talk about. And on the history of killing, the battlefields for most of humanity, people didn't try to kill the other guys. They just didn't. Even if you look at the Napoleonic Wars, you look at the finds, you have muskets with multiple bullets in there because people wanted to look busy. They couldn't bring themselves to kill someone else, right? There are some deep positive traits of humans. We don't want to damage people we care about. We have to have a competition with the other. And obviously it can be dangerous what we define as the other and what we define as competition. So what I do think we can do is, and I don't think text is going to solve it, not at all, not VR either. But some people are more heard than other people. But what I do think we can do is help people. We can lower the threshold of active thinking, right? We can get rid of the crud in technical stuff. So people will sit down, and this is where I'm completely on the ease of use side. There's a lot of stuff in software that just doesn't need to be there. You should be able to sit down, work, and be happy, right? And if we do that, we will unlock, and this is not a right versus left, let me really make that clear, a more efficient way to deal with each other, right? So that we can dare listen to an opposing point without being afraid or angry. So I really, really think that this is, we talk at McLuhan and people talk about global village and all of these things. With these little headset things, which will have many detrimental things, they will put people in isolation. Of course, a lot of horrible things will happen with any technology. But I do think that if people like us keep pushing, keep developing, keep being inclusive, we can at least nudge a little bit. So let's continue this discussion over the next few months. Tess.
Sorry, I've got a lot to say today, but I don't know if this is, I just to talk about your point and whether or not this is relevant to the bigger discussion in terms of building a better discourse. I come from a stand-up comedy background, and that is very bold opinions and people not backing down and saying very shocking, dramatic things. And, that's sort of baked into it. And then comedy is a very similar way. And I mention this because Frode and I met because of a mutual friend who I'm in an AI group with once a week. And it's people of all sectors. It's run by a company out of Seattle. And what I love about the group I'm in, and now this group too, is that it's people from all walks of life. They have different opinions. We're kind of figuring out AI together in this Tuesday group I do. And we change our opinions. Like we might not agree on something one week, and then the following week we're on opposite sides of this because we're kind of figuring it out. And it's intellectually stimulating in a way I didn't know I needed. And also because it isn't vitriolic and it isn't so ingrained, and it's, literally people trying to understand. Everyone has good intentions. Nobody wants to start a fight. Everyone's just trying to figure it out. And I don't know. And I find that in this group too. So thank you. And I mentioned my background because this might be how business works in other sectors. I don't know, because I'm used to being in rooms where people are saying shocking things and fighting about it, because that's sort of how you get to comedy sometimes. So I feel like if we can at least model this discourse with each other and bring it into other people in our lives, that's valuable. But also VR, to your point, will have a lot of detrimental effects, but it also can open up windows into the world for people. And that's not a bad thing either. Anyway, that's me.
Thank you. I have a comment, but Rob is clever with his hand.
Tess, can you put the AI group connection in the chat? Thank you.
Oh, was that it, Rob? Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
Okay, cool. Just writing 2 notes for me here. So one thing that was interesting in this very crazy lavish wedding on this weekend was there were some really fancy people there, British, almost aristocracy by the way they talked. So we talked a little bit of politics, and they were the whitest, richest, most privileged people, and they had a very wide, let's use the word empathy, for lots of situations. So that was nice. And then another issue that I personally care passionate about came up, and the person quite strongly disagreed with me. And, so we did some back and forth, and in the end, the person may not have changed their mind, but they had a more wider perspective. I was incredibly impressed by how they handled the discussion. But the reason I'm bringing it up is it kind of almost felt to me when I'm talking about some of these things that, you're talking to someone and you grab this argument out of the air, right? This is probably part of what we're talking about. Almost like, you're talking to somebody about, let's say, fishing rights. So we're not getting into controversial, right? Maybe you have made a space yourself. So you snap your fingers or something and you have your talking points, right? So you can bring them to the fore because they are citable there, right? And then they can say, well, actually, no. And I do know that having two knowledge graphs talking together is not the secret of the universe. It has been tried. But I am talking about being able to reference a vast body of information. But then the point of our Monday meetings is exactly what you said, Tess. It is to have the really, really pleasant human dialogue around that. So if you go into that headset with all your talking points and there's someone diametrically opposed to you, opposite, and you just start throwing things at each other, that's not very useful. And after Tom, let's talk a little bit about what Peter said about programming, because that's such a really interesting topic. Tom, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick that, one of the problems with conversation is that it's ephemeral. And I run into this all the time when I go to events and I have these fascinating conversations with people. And then afterwards, I'm like, who said that? Where did it go? Et cetera, et cetera. The flip side of that, as a teacher, I teach in all sorts of different modalities. I teach I teach asynchronously online. I teach synchronously online. And I teach in-person classes. And I actually find it these days frustrating in my in-person classes that I don't have a recording of the event. Whereas if I teach in Zoom, I always record my classes. And so that when students come and go, I don't understand this, I'm like, well, go watch the recording again. And if you still don't understand it, then come back to me and watch that part of the recording, then come back to me. And, that to me is really useful because we get into this synchronous, asynchronous problem or persistence problem is a better way of putting it. I think the best environments combine both. And so how do you seamlessly move from a live environment like this, which to environments that are persistent, in the chat. I mean, I know we save everything here. We record everything. We keep the chat, and that's very useful. And so when you can go back and look at these things, occasionally if the chat's particularly exciting, I'll save it myself, so I'll have it. But, that's the other thing is that, what part of the conversation do you save? What part is it stays around, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I think these are really important things that I think we could do some interesting things in terms of VR with. And I don't think it'll save the world, but I think I would love to see your thought cloud interacting with mine in a virtual space and looking for overlaps and looking for disagreements. Go, oh, well, we disagree on this. Talk about it. Let's see where we can do this, right? We do this in conversation all the time, but again, it's ephemeral. It's gone once we shut up, which I never do. So I'm going to shut up now.
When I was teaching, after I stopped teaching, I still had a bunch of students that I spent time with. And I asked them why they wanted to spend time as a group that I kind of mediated. And they said they felt there was a safe space. Right? That is so important with all of this and how we develop it. People need to feel safe to express their point of view, to disagree. And hopefully, maybe some of these technological things would help them do that so they can do it in a less confrontational manner. Now, I see things in the chat here, but so Peter, you brought up programming, and this comes down to what Tess was talking about, different kind of users and mentalities. I will never be able to learn how to program. I try every once in a while. Oh, Ega wants to say hi. Ega, come say hi real quick.
I'm asking if she wants some.
Yeah, no, I'm okay, thank you. Okay. Oh, wait, Jem is busy. Yeah, no, Edgar went camping this weekend with his friend and her dad. And what animals did you see?
Nothing.
What do you see Jim holding up? How cool is that? See you later. Close the door, please, man. Thank you, Jim. Jim, that was really sweet. Yeah, so with the programming, there is a mentality of how you think and how you can write these types of sentences. Not everybody will have it. If you ask me about like Photoshop or Final Cut, I can do things in 5 minutes that a lot of people will never be able to do. It's just different mentalities. But what Fabienne has been doing with code snippets and editability is so important. So ideally, Peter, these environments should be possible to access on a command level or equivalent level. But it should also be possible for someone on the other side of the spectrum to be able to put bits together to do more bits. So yeah, really, really important that it's not a passive experience.
Well, I really liked how HyperCard had the different levels. So you had the interacting with the stack level, you had the painting level where you just go in with some art tools to change what the background looked like, and you had the level where you were plugging in commands to buttons so that you could change the buttons' behavior, and then you got all the way down to the low-level programming level where you could go compiling X functions in C and plugging them into the HyperCard stack to add new functionality. For instance, there was one that made HyperCard color. Even though it was originally intended to be black and white, you were still able to graft in the code, and then suddenly you had color stacks to work with. And we really lost something when that technology went away. I wish Apple would bring it back, resurrect it, bundle into the operating system again, maybe even make it the core UI for a new device. But they don't do that kind of innovation anymore, sadly.
I completely agree with you, and I had a chance to spend some time with Bill Atkinson before he passed away a year before, and he wasn't interested in any of it. You know, he was an absolute genius, perfectionist who had moved on to other things. But the original insights that he had and what it was based on is just so important. And it's funny how some of us is stuck in certain generations. Like Ted Nelson doesn't want to do XR, but his big thing is connected documents. Like, how does that make sense? You know, it's perfect for it. So yeah, we should have absolutely, Peter, go back to some of those ways of looking at things. And Ken, please.
Maybe Ted would want to do XR if you told him the links went both ways.
It took me 3 years for him to watch Hamilton, so I'll take it slow.
Okay, yeah. Let's see. I wanted to point out that we do, in many, many contexts, and I completely agree with the HyperCard analogy. I thought what Bill Atkinson was amazing. In many contexts, we just take for granted that there are different levels for different people. You know, if I become a master chef, I don't necessarily need to know very much at all about how the plumbing works that enables that. But somebody needs to know, and I need to know how to contact them. So it's very human to develop these different levels of interfaces. I think my favorite quote about that was from a writer friend of mine who was talking about the importance of plot in narrative. And he said, plot is to narrative as a skeleton is to your lover. It's not why you fell in love with them, but you want them to have one. And I think that applies to everything. It's like we don't have to be the expert in something, but we need to have the interfaces between the levels. Otherwise, we don't get anything done as a species. And we just need to keep applying those principles to these cyber areas, and I think we'll be fine.
And that is definitely part of the point of the future of text community. So yes, and we need to do just much more. I mean, like Doug Engelbart's connected communities and all that. Absolutely. Ashkant, please.
Love that example. I kind of wanted to comment a bit on the programming side of things that we're discussing, that Peter highlighted. So one of the things was about, yeah, thank you. Um, yeah, I was just experimenting with RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. It's a technique in AI to give AI memory, so to speak, right? So we have ways in which we can encode like text, images, audio, like various kinds of multimedia, even videos, into some sort of a latent space and embedding space. And then we're able to bring them out contextually. So let's say if we're talking about certain kind of XR tags or like authors, and in the space that in the software that we're developing, and if you want to leave an audio note, and if we're able to encode that into this embedding space using RAG techniques, then I think that would also be an interesting way of capturing information. Maybe like I want to save some audio note, like a visual of why I arranged my space in the particular way I did, or why I connected different nodes together. And that does not necessarily have to be very, like a programming thing or a node-based thing, or like very explicit UI interactions. It can even be as fluid as, just audio notes that I put together when I'm interacting with the software. So maybe that's one thing that I could think of in this context, since I was experimenting with RAG, algorithms recently.
That's an interesting additional dimension. Thank you for that. Something to think about. I have a small comment, but Peter, please.
Okay, I saw way back in the mists of memory from like the 1980s, or maybe it was the early Copland OS era before that project got killed. But someone did a software visualization of a data flow programming environment where you were the piece of data flying through the program. So the visualization was sort of like um, shooting down through a tunnel, and if you came up to an if statement, you'd see the condition, and then there'd be two branches of the tunnel, and you would follow whichever branch the particular datum that you were writing through the data flow system took. And sadly, I didn't write anything down about it at the time because I didn't realize it'd be of significance 30 years forward. And if anyone ever saw that or could think of the reference to it, any pointers would be most deeply appreciated. Um, Another thought that's occurred to me is that when we're programming, it's useful to have higher order programs too. And I kind of like the functional model. So what I was thinking was, how could we expose people to functional programming and just let them discover programming instead of just telling them about it and handing them a piece of document? Could you give children an environment where they would discover the programming because it was innately embedded in the objects that we're playing with? So I think, like, what if you had a wand, but the wand was really the data stack in fourth. And if you touch the wand to something, an ID associated with each item you touch the wand would get pushed onto the stack. And then maybe you could have a crystal ball, which could be an operation. And if you touch the wand to the crystal ball, it could pop elements off and replace them with a new value. And you could have the programming language sitting there underneath the toys, being interacted with through physical interactions. And I wonder what kids would do in an environment like that. Would they start to build a mental model of stacks and queues and the other data structures if there was an embodiment of them that they were playing with?
That's interesting, Peter. Before I forget, a little bit about voice and annotation and so on, Ashkan. I'm developing for author a better journaling mechanism, because I feel that not the journaling like you have in some apps, is how are you feeling today and all of that stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about literally, I had a great meeting with Fabienne today. We decided so on. Now I'm going to go have dinner with my friend, blah, blah, right? Because over time, even a basic LLM can do really nice analysis of this. And in doing so, even me, I don't want to sit down on my laptop and spend time typing. That's when I do other work. So a natural thing would be to use my mobile phone to do that. So I've been experimenting with talking to an agent, obviously Siri, and it's quite bad because the agent will think I'm done before I'm done, right? So I've been experimenting with just adding to reminders when I would then manually copy it in. So to speak to a document with using the speech to text, so much better. And I find that kind of a detail really, really interesting to find out when certain affordances are more useful and when they're weird. Yeah, no, exactly. That's close to, Tom, what you're talking about, dictating into a Google Doc. I'm not comfortable with Google having all my information, but that's another story. But yeah, those are the kind of things to think about. So we're running out of time. I'm extremely grateful for today. And particularly, Fabienne, if you have any comments on doing the basics of having some, what looks to be just text sentences or words in space, organizable, and if you do something to them, in some cases, there may be more behind them. Any further thoughts on how we should move forward?
I think
Probably
everyone's
know
doing
how
great.
feasible.
Well, sorry, I just wanted to say I think everyone's doing great. That's all. Moving forward.
Yeah, I was wondering if Fabian would have a sense of how feasible it would be to have that probe concept so that you'd just be moving your hand a small amount and that would be controlling the vector of the probe, which could be moving at a higher rate of speed depending upon how far your hand was deflected from the central position. Is that something that'd be easy to code, or would that be a nightmare to try to code?
Well, I'll put some links, but we have a couple of demos also where we play with vectors in order to make them more tangible, precisely because it's something abstract and yet that we manipulate indirectly on our daily lives. So if I understood what you meant in terms of like what the probe could do, that's what I would rely on. And I would say probably not too hard, because the whole, let's say in WebXR, but any kind of 3D environment has all the utilities for this kind of computation. So if you know what's the operation you want to do, like with a probe, it doesn't sound hard, but obviously that's my naive understanding of the idea.
Okay, very encouraging.
Thank you for that. Now, I have decided, and I've decided in the sense of anybody can disagree, what we should focus our last few months on is thoughts in space. Because, Peter, what you're talking about there as an example is going through existing information, which is very, very important to develop libraries and other ways. But let's imagine, we're traveling. We brought our keyboard, we have that, and our headset, nothing else. And something complicated we have to figure out. How would we want to do that? It's so non-straightforward. But if we, as I say, of course, every week, if you have anything specific, please give it to me in writing or drawing or whatever. Because even, what should the action be to make a new text snippet in space? Right? We don't want it to become accidental. And should it be where we do the snippet, or should there be a writing area? Once you have it, how do you move it? Do you do the billboarding? How do we reveal more information? And then also, how do you package it? Because once you've built your knowledge for this, I mean, Rob, particularly, see if you have the same issue, but once you've written stuff, it might be difficult to kind of go back and find stuff, at least for me. I write many articles, and then it's like, hang on, didn't I write something about this before? That really should be Ken's bookshelf, shouldn't it? Our own articles should have a space that's either always there or computationally there. So we know if it's about code snippets, oh yeah, that's that stuff. These are so obvious things, but over the year, we haven't been able to solve them. Now we have done our work. Now we can work on it. Tom.
I was just saying I do this already, in the sense that when I write a blog, I dump it into a Notebook LM notebook, and I use that to synthesize and to see where the ideas are. For instance, one of the things I'm going to do is in terms of focusing my thinking is what do I want to talk about at the symposium? And I also have a list. I have another library, or I have a combined library, which has my stuff plus my Canon so to speak, of people like Ted Nelson or Doug Engelbart or whatever. And I'm going to say, okay, where are the intersections here that will help me figure out an interesting way of putting some of this stuff, because my thoughts clearly have a direction. It's just sometimes hard to see.
I think that's important, Tom, and for us, it's literally next level. I think we need to figure out the little bits in space first and then connect it with various sources, including, Fabian, if you don't listen, please, AI later on. Rob, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just writing a note. You talked about being able to record thoughts, and activating the microphone seems like a simple way of allowing you to put text into things. Especially in VR, where typing is not easy.
Well, if you use native Mac software, Vision OS software, it will do the keyboard. You can see the keyboard, but that doesn't work in unfortunately, WebXR or anything like that. So we're definitely not throwing away hardware, but there should be more efficient ways of doing it. But even okay, Fabian is giving us links here. Peter, I hope you're copying down Fabian's comments here.
Of course.
Yeah, excellent. But you know, at the end of my little presentation, I asked the question of why. You know, what are the things we would want to do in XR? You know, one of them is to find stuff in vast repositories. Another one is this thing of inventing something. I use the word inventing very loosely. All these cool links. Yeah, seeing things with new perspective. Maybe we can all be motivated by helping some of the difficult discussions happening in the world today.
When I'm talking about the knowledge navigator, one of the things I say there is that as a photographer, you know, the difference between a boring photograph and an interesting photograph is almost always one of perspective. You know, if you take a picture of a glass on a table, it's just sitting there, it's kind of boring. But if you maybe get up underneath the glass and you see the shapes and how the shapes interact with one another, that makes it interesting, right? And the same thing is true with information. You know, we see the same information over and over again. We get into these thought paths and this is the way the world works, et cetera, et cetera. But when somebody pulls us out of that, or something pulls us out of that, and we suddenly go, oh, I never looked at it that way before. That's where that moment of interaction and connection between ideas really happens. And that's where it's really powerful, because I think one of the problems right now, we have way too much information. We all get tunnel vision because of it. And so how do we break that tunnel vision?
It's interesting that you talk about photography, because you're talking about an interesting photo. So this weekend at that fancy wedding, I took 1,783 pictures. And that was fun. But many of them are bzz because people blink, and that means you don't get the blink, right? And also I see what Peter's talking about, having a moment. It is, you know, with a photograph, what are you trying to capture? Are you trying to capture something aesthetic, of reality, an emotion, a memory, trying to make it interesting, or are you trying to make it clear? All the same question. So Tom, that's a great opportunity. I mean, I wrote an article for our book, kind of the introduction one, where I talk a little bit about how a photographer chooses lenses, tools, and all of that stuff, and a knowledge worker should. And then I realized the funny thing that the word camera by itself, just originally, as you all know, meant room. When you put on your headset, you're entering a room, right? So we're talking about a camera to think with. So I think that is a lovely analogy to close the discussion on. And I really hope that we'll continue with the basics, just putting a word in its space and moving it about. There's a lot there. Any final words, or are we finishing 2 minutes early today?
Great discussion. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Peter. I look forward to seeing you all Monday week. Hang on, before you all go, Monday week will be Mark and Dini coming back to report on ACM hypertext and the testing and continued dialogue. So take care, everyone. Bye for now.
I don't know if you've looked at this before, but I threw some stuff in there about the Sun Wonderland, because they have some interesting data representations in there that I remember that really struck me. And one thing is they use a sphere. And I shared an article that talks about it as well as some graphics. So you'll get it it's in the text chat.
Yeah, all the links will be on the website. I'm going to scroll this one back because I'm not sure if I clicked on it. So thank you for highlighting that again.
Yeah, it kind of got lost in the train.
Which is one of the issues, yes. Well, on that note, thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful week and see you in a week.
Thank you. Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Take care. Bye-bye.